So it's pretty interesting. There was a leak recently from Arc System Works that they are working on a Unreal Engine 5 exclusive Nintendo Switch 2 game from the Another Code team. Could be like a Hotel Dusk or some type of visual novel action adventure game, but we don't really know at this point. But with that, there's been a lot of stolen and leaked information, which I don't want to get into too much, but one of the things that's been kind of a controversial point for people online are what are the options that Nintendo is offering for physical games and just game formats on the Nintendo Switch 2. So we know with the Nintendo Switch 1, there were 2 GB cards, or more like 4 GB cards. I think there was 8 GB cards, there was 16 GB cards, and there was 32 GB cards. And with the Nintendo Switch 2, there was a rumor that all Nintendo was offering is, I think, 8 GB cards and 64 GB cards, or potentially just 64 GB cards for the full physical game, in addition to the game key card system, which doesn't have any real data on there. You essentially get a digital game that operates as a physical title overall that's not tied to your account, then of course full digital games. And now we have a little bit more information rumor wise when it comes down to that, because there was this leak and it does seem like that is the option. So you can go with the 64 GB card, you can go with the game key cards, or you can just go with the all digital release. Now some people have wondered, well, wait a minute, why are Nintendo only offering 64 GB cards? Maybe that's the reason why we have so many game key cards instead of actually having the full physical games. Nintendo Everything wrote about this. Also, My Nintendo News, where I saw the article, they talked about, oh, well, developers are opting to not use it because there's not a 32 GB option. And maybe this is the case. Once again, we have to wait and see. Nintendo does have 2 games that would fall under this if they're talking about it, right? They have 2 games with Mario Kart World, which that is like a 20-something gigabyte game, and with Donkey Kong Bonanza, that is like a 10 GB game or something. So if there aren't any other options, then we would kind of know what those, although I guess Nintendo might have more options than third-party developers. So right now it's kind of tough to say. It's kind of more like a rumor-ish, or more like, hey, we don't know 100% overall. We don't know how old this data is and all that. There's so many different things that I don't want to put it as 100%. But I would say this when it comes down to the game key cards and also with the physical games, because we've kind of talked about it ad nauseum at this point. It's been a tired old topic, but people are really thinking that just because there isn't a 32 GB option, that's the reason why developers are not opting for a physical or real physical release. And man, it's funny because we just had that option on the Nintendo Switch 1, and many developers also opted to not release it on a 32 GB cartridge. Now, I know that 64 GB is probably a lot more expensive than 32, but a lot of developers think 32 GB is also too expensive. Let me give you a couple examples here. You look at Hogwarts Legacy, that game was not even on a 16 GB cartridge on the Nintendo Switch 1, and they opted to use, I think, like an 8 GB cartridge on Switch 1, and then you download the rest of the data. Now with the Nintendo Switch 2, I think they've upped it to like 24 GB, and they still aren't using a real physical, it's a game key card, just kind of like how it was on the Nintendo Switch 1. You also look at the total amount of actual 32 GB cartridges that developers used on the Nintendo Switch 1, which there were a number of games that would actually require, like, hey, look, we can get this on a 32 GB cartridge if you want to, and most developers opted to not do that. They opted to do it like on an 8 GB cartridge or a smaller gigabyte cartridge, and then make you download the rest of the game, just like a game key card. There's only, I think, about 5 or so Nintendo Switch 1 games that actually even use a 32 GB cartridge because they are so expensive. So I'm not so sure developers would even opt for that when they didn't really opt for that on the Nintendo Switch 1, when there were plenty of opportunities for them to use a 32 GB cartridge with multiple different games, and they opted to not use the 32 GB cartridge at all. So I wouldn't necessarily believe that, oh yeah, all of a sudden, if they offered that option on Nintendo Switch 2, they would. Now with the 64 GB cartridge, even with that, that's offered, and developers still opted to not use it. So for example, you have Street Fighter, you also have Split Fiction, which is 71 GB, but they probably could have optimized it to get it under the requirement for the cartridge, and they didn't, just like Cyberpunk optimized to get it underneath the required limit, and that's like a 170 GB game on the PC. So they definitely could have done that, and they didn't. There's also other games as well on the Nintendo Switch 2 when it comes to like Hitman and other big titles, Yakuza 0, that absolutely could have been on a 64GB cartridge and they opted not to. So while I do believe, yes, if they could offer 32GB cartridges and all that, that'd be great for developers to use them. There's not really a lot of proof that they would even use them, considering many developers opted to not use a 32GB cartridge on the Nintendo Switch 1. There's so few games. I think, like I said, I can count it on one, maybe two hands when it comes down to it, but there's not many. So I think really it's just a cost-cutting measure for a lot of these developers to just use a game key card or do what they did on the Nintendo Switch 1, essentially make you download most of the game overall. But we'll see how the process goes. Some people are wondering why would they even do that in the first place. I'm thinking it's because of bulk production. If you're only producing, you know, one type of card or very few types of cards, then it makes it significantly cheaper than producing like an 8 and a 16 and a 32 and a 64. That makes it way more expensive. So I'm guessing that's the reason. And as the Switch goes on and production gets maybe a bit cheaper or gets more streamlined with those outside of the launch window, then we might see like a 32GB card, or we might see some other options available for developers, because it does seem like a lot of wasted space. So for example, Guardians of Azuma, that game is nowhere near 64GB on the Nintendo Switch 2, but they're still on a 64GB cartridge overall. So there is some, I would say, evidence to this when it comes down to it, even before this Arc System leaks work. So we'll see what happens in the future with the physical options or not. But I'll also see what happens in the future with all those that are hitting that subscribe button if you want the best Nintendo Switch 2 content. So hit that sub button, hit that like button, and click that notification bell to get my vids as soon as they drop. Now let's go ahead and jump into the next topic here, and that is Virtua Fighter 5 Revo coming to PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and new announced the Nintendo Switch 2, and it supports crossplay and rollback netcode, plus more that's going to be dropping. So definitely a good thing here. Fighting games, like I've stated before, need to be cross-platform, need to be cross-save, need to be cross-fight. They need to be on multiple platforms in order for you to have the best chance for a fighting game in today's day when it comes to third-party fighting games to have success. So let's get into Virtua Fighter 5 Revo. That first launched on PC via Steam on January 28th. Now we got it multi-platform here. Quote, "I know we've kept you waiting. Our Steam release of Virtua Fighter Revo is finally coming to PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and the Nintendo Switch 2, said Legacy Virtua Fighter project producer Seiji during today's Virtua Fighter Direct 2025 spring. Since Virtua Fighter 5 Revo's launch, we've heard your requests for multi-platform support via the official Virtua Fighter Discord and other channels. We on the development team want to give users on all platforms the opportunity to enjoy Virtua Fighter 5 Revo, so we are happy to bring you this announcement. In bringing this title to multiple platforms, we're planning to include cross-play support, and to make your cross-play experience even smoother, the rollback functionality used in the Steam version will be supported on all platforms. We're going to include even more content to make this much more than a simple port, which we'll tell you about in the future." So one thing that's definitely good here coming from at least the Nintendo Switch side is that we've seen some developers update games and put them out on Xbox and PlayStation PC with rollback netcode and then leave out Nintendo Switch in the past. We saw this with Samurai Showdown. We saw this with Dragon Ball Fighters. So this is definitely good news for the Nintendo Switch Online, for the fact that they're making an update here, they're bringing it to consoles, and the Nintendo Switch 2 is not being left out with the rollback netcode and everything. Now we know there are plenty of games that have rollback netcode fighting titles on the Nintendo Switch 1, but I think that with the Nintendo Switch Online test that they did, they are making big improvements to exactly how everything interacted and the reaction and the speed and the netcode in terms of things, so they can make sure that developers, when they bring over their fighting games with complex rollback or with other things, that they are not left out, because even one is too many, and we had multiple. We had at least two that I can count of games that launched on the Nintendo Switch 1, got updates for rollback netcode, and were not included on the Nintendo Switch 1. They were only included on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC in turn. terms of things. So yeah, you definitely don't want that. So that makes me believe that Nintendo has significantly upgraded the Nintendo Switch Online, coming up with the Nintendo Switch 2, or just the Nintendo Switch Online in general, if we are having Virtua Fighter, which is obviously big game when it comes to fighting. They want to make sure everything is lightning quick in response, and you're actually getting that on the Nintendo Switch 2 day and date with Xbox and PlayStation with rollback netcode on top of the extra content. Definitely a good thing to see overall. So very excited about that. And that's pretty funny that they're actually using the Direct moniker overall. Nintendo really revolutionized how people present things. Everybody is calling stuff Directs or having these presentations literally using the same name. That's wild. But hey, innovation, that's what it comes down to, right? So what do you guys think about the Virtua Fighter 5 Revo coming over to PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, Nintendo Switch 2, with the extra sweet news that yes, rollback netcode on all platforms, cross-play. I think I said cross-save. I'm not so sure about cross-save, but cross-play for sure overall. I don't think they said cross-save. But yes, cross-play as well. Let me know in the comment section. But let's also get into this next topic, which I thought was very interesting. I made a little joke on Twitter about it. And there was an article about potentially Nintendo using AI images. People were accusing them. And I thought it was so funny, the write-up from My Nintendo News saying that some eagle-eyed fans spotted what they believed to be AI-generated images on various billboards scattered throughout Mario Kart World in a recent Nintendo Treehouse stream of a game. Like, you're not eagle-eyed. We all saw the same. Eagle-eyed means that, like, oh man, you spotted something that people didn't spot in the background, or something in the distance, or certain little details. We all saw the same images. When I saw those images, I know that Nintendo has always made little like images for different types of things, right? When it comes to Mario Kart, like fake different advertisements or sponsors or whatever. They've been doing that for a long time when it comes to Mario Kart. So the fact that some people were trying to say, oh, eagle-eyed for spotting out images and accusing them of something that they don't know at this point, because apparently Eurogamer reached out to Nintendo for a comment on this, and Nintendo was like, yeah, AI generated images were not used in the development of Mario Kart World. And that was the quote from the Nintendo spokesperson. And I always thought it was just funny, because it's like people just accuse everything of being AI. I get it. Like, yes, you want to know if something's AI or not, and I understand, but you're not eagle-eyed for spotting that out. Let me just say that right now. That's not an eagle-eyed type of thing to do. That's just accusing something of being AI just because you want to, not because you know it's AI compared to something else. So a lot of people have started doing that. Once again, I get it, because there are a lot of AI images out there, and yes, AI development is starting to take place in gaming, but at the same time, like, I just thought it was funny, the write-up, and I never thought for one second that it was AI. I know Nintendo said that they don't really want to use AI and stuff. They've actually already commented on that, so I wouldn't feel that any of their games would. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting that the write-up in terms of what My Nintendo News said, in addition to just simply people saying it's AI without even having any actual evidence of it being AI, you know. But once again, it is getting harder and harder to see and detect the AI images in games and all that. But yeah, it is what it is. There's no AI. I just wanted to bring that up to you guys. There's no AI when it comes to Mario Kart overall. The only AI might be DLSS, deep learning super sampling, which is the good type of AI to make stuff look better in the games and sharper. So yeah, anyway, that's that. Let's get to the next topic here, guys. We're going to talk about the mouse mode for the Nintendo Switch 2. Nintendo actually updated recently, talking about mouse mode to navigate the home menu. They posted this on the Nintendo Today app. So yeah, you can go to the mouse mode, and you can actually go to the controllers, like where you set up, and you can look and see how to use mouse mode. So you will be able to use it on the home menu, just showing off a little bit more of the finer little details of the system before launch. This launch is going to be huge overall. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of everything about the Nintendo Switch 2. People are just talking about it, whether it's positive or negative. It's the biggest thing that people are talking about online, is the Nintendo Switch 2, one way or another. We know about the pre-orders. That's something that we've talked about before, but of course Nintendo knows, and they've said this before, that hey, look, pre-orders, launch sales, that doesn't necessarily guarantee incredible success or anything. But I will say that the amount of people surely just talking about it at this point, and the amount of time that it's taken to get to this point when it comes to Nintendo Switch 1 to Nintendo Switch 2 has left a lot of people wanting something a bit stronger, left a lot of people wondering, like, hey, when can we get something that's going to add a few different things to the mix? And the mouse mode and stuff like this is definitely a nice little addition. Not the biggest thing overall, but I think that for some games and for some applications, it's going to make being able to play the game. For example, like a Civilization, right? Something like that. That'd probably be a lot better on mouse mode, trying to emulate what you get on PC, or even shooting games. Metroid Prime, Call of Duty, when that comes out later, I think that that is going to be huge when it comes to certain applications with mouse mode. Now, the only thing that I'd like to see is that I like to see actual official accessories for mouse mode that make it more comfortable for longer play sessions, because the Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con 2s are actually pretty thin overall, so your hands might feel a little bit cramped after a while. I use a mouse that's a lot thicker and bigger than a Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con 2, and I know that something thin would probably get my hand a little bit fatigued after using it if I had to use it for a while. So I'm hoping that Nintendo actually has something, or even third-party developers create something, because I saw people doing 3D printed ones and type of weird stuff in terms of shells for the Joy-Con 2s. So hopefully we get something official so people can just buy it right there, which I think that there might already be some like third-party manufacturers, but we need some officially licensed ones and stuff like that. But that's that when it comes to the mouse mode and everything. So what do you guys think about everything that we talked about here? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.